Good morning, dear students. So we are going to continue with the chapter Silk Road, and I hope you must have read the chapter till the end. So we had seen that the author had reached Darshan, where he fell sick and due to asphyxia, that is, he was not able to breathe properly due to the lack of oxygen. Now, when he was taken to the medical college, Sitan had seen that he was recovering and he had taken a good sleep. Then Sitan wanted to go back to Lhasa, and when he saw that the author was okay, he took leave of him. Once he saw that I was going to live, Sitan left me. Now you can see in this sentence how the author is very humorous about himself, and he says, when I was going to live, that is, actually he was struggling because of the cold that he had, that severe cold, and he was not able to breathe properly. But once when he was given medicine, he was feeling well. But here he is just making fun of himself, and he says that when Sitan saw that he was going to live and nothing will happen to him, Sitan left him to return to Lhasa. As a Buddhist, he told me he knew that it did not really matter if I passed away, but he thought it would be bad for his business. So Sitan followed Buddhism, and as a Buddhist he felt that if the author, even if he died, if he passed away in that holy place, it would be good for him, and that wouldn't be a big issue or a matter. But he thought that it would be certainly bad for his business, because he would not get other tourists due to this kind of incident. Darshan did not look so horrible after a good night's sleep. It was still dusty, partially derelict, and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. But the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas, commanded by a huge snow-capped mountains. Gurla Mandata with just a wisp of cloud suspended over its summit. In this paragraph, the author has described Darshan, the town where he had stayed. Now he was all alone because Sitan had left him, and when he had a look at the place, he felt it was a dusty place, though it did not look very horrible like Hor, and it was partially derelict, that is, neglected, and which was in a very poor condition due to this negligence, punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. So there were heaps of garbage and refuse somewhere around. But the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas. But it was very close to the Himalayas, that place, and the author was able to see the Himalayas commanded by a huge snow-capped mountains. In fact, he was able to see the snow-capped mountains that surrounded that area. Gurla Mandata with just a wisp of cloud suspended over its summit. Wisp of cloud means very scarce, very few clouds suspended were seen on the summit, on the top of this Gurla Mandata mountain. The town had a couple of rudimentary general stores selling Chinese cigarettes, soap, and other basic provisions, as well as the usual strings of prayer flags. So this is the beautiful description of the place. You can see how minute observations have been done by the author. In front of one, men gathered in the afternoon for a game of pool. The battered table, which was not in a very good condition, looking supremely incongruous in the open air. Incongruous, you can see the word congruous comes from the word congruent, and it means similar, or which is incongruous, which is not similar, or which is not as per the circumstance there. So the game of pool, the table for playing the game of pool was absolutely out of sorts in that open air. While nearby, women washed their long hair in the icy water of a narrow brook that babbled down past my guest house. Brook is a small river, and in the mountainous regions you can see such you don't see huge rivers. You can see such small rivers, and the women were washing their long hair in the icy water. It was very close to the author's guest house. Darshan felt relaxed and unhurried, but for me it came with a significant drawback. There were no pilgrims. So Darshan was very scarcely populated, and therefore the author felt that it was a very relaxed place, or the place where nobody was in a hurry. It was a very cool place where he could stay. But the only thing that he felt the drawback was that there were no pilgrims. Now, the author has also said that why he came to know why there were no pilgrims there in that particular time when he was there. I had been told that at the height of the pilgrimage season means the peak of the season when the pilgrims used to visit Mount Kailash. The town was bustling with visitors. Many brought their own accommodation, enlarging the settlement around its edges as they set up their tents, which spilled down on the plain. I had timed my arrival for the beginning of the season, but it seemed I was too early. One afternoon I sat pondering my options over a glass of tea in Darshan's only cafe. After a little consideration, I concluded that they were severely limited. Clearly, I hadn't made much progress with my self-help program on positive thinking. In my defense, it hadn't been easy with all my sleeping difficulties, but however I looked at it, I could only wait. The pilgrimage trail was well trodden, but I did not fancy doing it alone. So when the author was all alone in Darshan and there were very few pilgrims, he decided that he would not do the Kora all alone. And the pilgrimage trail, the road that took the pilgrims for the Kora, was well trodden, but at that time it was not so. So he thought that he would not go all alone. The Kora was seasonal because parts of the route were liable to blockage by snow. I had no idea whether or not the snow had cleared, but I wasn't encouraged by the chunks of dirty ice that still clung to the banks of Darshan's brook. So the author was not able to decide whether he should go alone because of this reason too, that he had seen the chunks of ice around the Darshan's brook river, and he felt that even the pilgrimage trail or the road would be blocked by snow. So he didn't want to take any risk going alone there. Since Sitan had left, I hadn't come across anyone in Darshan with enough English to answer even this most basic question. So it was there he found that it was very difficult to understand the local people, their language, as hardly anyone knew English to give him the a reply about the questions that he had in his mind. Until that is, I met Norbu. So, in this paragraph, the author has described how he met Norbu and who he was. When the author was having tea all alone in that only cafe there, he met Norbu. The cafe was small, dark, and cavernous, with a long metal stove and that ran down the middle. The walls and ceiling were wreathed in sheets of multicolored plastic of the striped variety, broad blue, red, and white, that is made into stout, voluminous shopping bags, solid all over China and in many other countries of Asia as well as Europe. As such, plastic must rate as one of China's most successful exports along the Silk Road today. So you can see that how the author has described or given a minute description of the cafe. It was a temporary settlement which was known to be the cafe there, and in the middle there was a big stove on which the person used to make tea for the pilgrims. And the walls were covered by there weren't any walls. In fact, all around there were plastic sheets. The cafe had a single window beside which I had taken up position so that I could see the pages of my notebook. I had also brought a novel with me to help pass the time. So, since there was no light inside the cafe, it was a dark place. The author sat beside a window where he could sit and read his novel. Norbu saw my book when he came in and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite me at the rickety table. So you can see, as I told you, it was the cafe was a temporary settlement, and even the table and chairs which were put there, the author has described them as a rickety table. Rickety comes from the word ricket, and ricket is actually a disease caused due to the deficiency of vitamin D, and in that the limbs become very feeble and they don't the person can't stand straight. So similarly, therefore the author has used rickety word for the table, because the furniture was not very sturdy one. So at that time, when Norbu entered the cafe, he saw the author reading the book, and there he came and asked him, "You English?" he inquired, after he had ordered tea. I told him I was, and we struck up a conversation. In this paragraph, the author has described Norbu. He says that I did not think he was from those parts because he was wearing a wind cheater and metal-rimmed spectacles of Western style. He was Tibetan, he told me, but worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. I assumed he was on some sort of field work. So the author had spotted Norbu as a person who was not from those parts, that is from Darshan. He was not a localite. He was later he informed him that he was a Tibetan, and he worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. Yes and no, he said. I have come to do the Kora. My heart jumped. Norbu had been writing academic papers about the Kailash Kora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature for many years, he told me, but he had never actually done it himself. So this time, this academician Norbu was a very good companion for the author, and the author says that his heart jumped when he came to know that he also had come to do the Kora, because this time he wanted to experience it himself. When the time came for me to tell him what brought me to Darshan, his eyes lit up. We could be a team, he said excitedly. Two academics who have escaped from the library. Perhaps my positive thinking strategy was working after all. My positive thinking strategy, the author means to say that though he was all alone at Darshan and he wanted to complete the Kora, there weren't any pilgrims and there were harsh climatic conditions, yet he had a positive thinking that he would be able to complete his mission for which he had come there. He was not depressed at all or sad about it. And he says because of this positive thinking, perhaps he could meet Norbu there. My initial relief at meeting Norbu, who was also staying in the guest house, was tempered by the realization that he was almost as ill-equipped as I was for the pilgrimage. He kept telling me how fat he was and how hard it was going to be, very high up there. He kept reminding me, so tiresome to walk. He wasn't really a practicing Buddhist. It transpired, but he had enthusiasm and he was, of course, Tibetan. Although I had originally envisaged making the trek in the company of devout believers, on reflection I decided that perhaps Norbu would turn out to be the ideal companion. He suggested we hire some yaks to carry our luggage, which I interpreted as a good sign, and he had no intention of prostrating himself all round the mountain. Not possible, he cried, collapsing across the table in hysterical laughter. It wasn't his style, and anyway his tummy was too big. So in this last paragraph of the chapter also you can see how humorous the author is and what kind of conversation he had with Norbu. They both were ill-equipped, that is, they did not have all the means and sources to do the Kora. And this Kora is also a big, as I told you yesterday, it is a circumambulation of the mountain, the Mount Kailash. And in that, they need to have all the sources so that they can walk around it. So they decided to hire some yaks. Now, yaks are the long-haired animals, more or less like bullocks or the buffaloes, and they are mostly found in these mountainous regions, and they are actually domesticated there in those areas to carry the luggage of the pilgrims. So in this way they decided to hire some yaks so that they could complete the Kora, because it was a very difficult trek for them. And how the author makes fun of Norbu, that is, asking him whether he had any intentions of going round the mountain for the Kora by prostrating himself. Prostrating means lying flat on the ground with your belly downwards. So some pilgrims used to do that. If you remember, you can you can think of the pilgrims if you have seen such. And then Norbu was really in hysterical laughter, and he almost collapsed across the table by saying that his tummy was too big and it wasn't possible for him, and that wasn't his style. So this is how we can see that how the author Nick Middleton enjoyed going to such a place, Mount Kailash, and was able to complete his Kora. So I'm going to recapitulate the chapter further. Please write short notes on all the points that are recapitulated in the next video. Thank you. So this is the recapitulation of the chapter, Silk Road. First point, departure from Ravu. So in this you will write a paragraph of how the author took leave from Lhamo and how he departed, where was he going, with whom was he going, and how he was going. Then sights on their way. which were the sites that they saw, what did they see specially. Then description of Drugbas, encounter with Tibetan mastiffs, ice blocks on the road, description of a small town hall, author's experience at Darshan, Sitan's views as a Buddhist, and meeting with Norbu. So all these points you need to write a short paragraph. Thank you so much.